You are taking a look inside Kansas politics. Welcome in. I'm Mackenzie Davis and for Denisha Richard. Abortion, school choice, and medical marijuana. So many issues discussed in the Kansas legislature in the past few months, and Inside Kansas Politics reached out to you to get your thoughts on these issues. So today's show is all about you. So we will talk about some of those responses that we got. And joining me are two political experts to help us analyze your thoughts, Bob Beatty and Michael Smith. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Welcome. Okay, so a note before we get started. The data gathered by the survey was not for scientific use. The survey was simply a way to get raw feedback from Kansans to discuss today. And people across the country have had their eyes on Kansas. We were actually about the first state to vote on an amendment following the Roe v. Wade. So Kansas is one of the handful of states that have not legalized medical marijuana, unlike neighboring states, that is. There's so much going on right here in the Sunflower State, so let's break it down a little bit. Guys ready?
Ready to go.
Okay, so let's talk about what Kansans are saying. Do you think Kansas legislatures are focusing on the right issues? That's one of the questions that we asked. So here are some of your comments. The majority are not, sometimes, but not often enough. I think they do listen to their constituent concerns, and no. Now, we know you can't please everyone, and that goes for Kansas legislatures as well, but one argument some Kansans have is legislatures, that is, are pushing bills that don't necessarily line up with their constituents' beliefs, but instead their own. That leads into the question, what do you think legislatures should focus on more or less? Now, we'll get to that question in just a minute, but what was that first response that you guys want to have a reaction to?
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
The big question, of course, is how do you represent the constituents that you disagree with? And I think the culture war makes it more difficult because we see such polarization along party lines. A great example is in rural areas. A lot of the things that affect our rural areas most really have nothing to do with liberal, conservative, Democratic, or Republican. Things like the water shortage, which is a far bigger crisis than many of the things the legislature is spending time on. And they are spending some time on that too. But I think the big question is how do we get past the culture war and start talking about these issues that affect all of us, and they especially affect certain districts, and it really doesn't matter about party.
Right.
And you have to be careful, Mackenzie, because if there's too much of a disconnect between voters or the people and politicians or, you know, the legislatures, people get disgruntled with democracy. I've seen a little bit more of a widening of the gap in Kansas in the last few years between what the people are expressing and what the legislature does. And I think we're going to talk more about this in this show. But there's a couple issues, Medicaid expansion and medical marijuana, in which the Kansas voters in surveys after survey after survey have shown that they want to see enacted. And actually fairly high percentages, we're talking 60–70%, and the legislature, as we'll discuss, is not acting on those. So if we see some frustration, that might be it.
Yeah. Now, speaking of legislation of medical marijuana, Kansas is one of the states that has not legalized medical marijuana, but neighboring states, Colorado, Missouri, have. So there is a lot going on right here in the Sunflower State. So how do we feel about that?
Well, I think the border issues are really critical now that Missouri has also legalized recreational marijuana. I was in Kansas City the other day, and there are actually dispensaries on the east side of State Line Road that are drive-through.
Wow.
And there are plenty of Kansas license plates in the line. Now, legally, you're not supposed to bring it into Kansas. I don't think we want people getting high in Missouri and then driving home. And so with much of Kansas' population living close to the Missouri border, I think this really escalates it as a border issue. Of course, Colorado has had recreational marijuana legal for years, but that border is more sparsely populated.
Right. One of the questions was, do you think sports participation should be based on biological sex? Many of you did not like this question, possibly due to the fact Governor Laura Kelly vetoed the Fairness in Women's Sports Act. So yes, we did get chewed out just for asking this question. So here's what some of you had to say. Very touchy subject. If a male has a low enough testosterone level, they should be able to compete with women. Now, this is such an operationally insignificant issue. It is a waste of time. Let Keisha figure it out, and it's the fairest way. Here are your additional thoughts. Laura Kelly is shining as governor because she is a woman and a Democrat. Some will not give her the recognition she deserves. I believe she will be highly regarded in the future for all she has done for Kansas. And again, the Kansas Legislature committee process has been particularly lacking in decorum and process this year, and the practice of bundling bad bills, while not new, is bad government. Wow, that is a lot.
A lot of responses there.
A lot of responses.
And this one is very interesting. And we have to say that in the 2022 exit survey of voters, a majority said that there was not too much discussion in schools about racism, but there was too much discussion about sexual issues like the transgender issue.
Wow.
So people are very wary of this. It's a very touchy subject for sure. And I think that's one of the reasons that some don't like that it's become a political football or a wedge issue, because it impacts human lives at this point. And there's it's gone beyond just the actual legislation to become something that some are using as a sort of a point to score political points. And probably the best approach to it is to study it and take measured steps, and that's what, at least what many think. But sometimes it's become a political football.
And by the way, KSHA does already have pretty strict regulations. Even I'd almost call them invasive. Just so your viewers know, someone who is born biologically male cannot announce that they are female today and play girls' sports tomorrow.
Wow.
It's a pretty onerous process. And so when the state legislature votes on these bills, those that vote in favor are really saying, we don't like KSHA, we don't like their regulations, we know better.
Right. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a quick break because we have a lot of responses that we are going to look at from our survey. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
Doughboys Pizzeria, now with 2 locations in Topeka. Serving fresh pizza with our signature sauce, award-winning wings, awesome appetizers and desserts, with outdoor dining and entertainment. Call or order online at doughboys.pizza.
I would recommend to anybody Devon James.
They're knowledgeable. They care. I mean, they truly care.
Felt like they were in our corner 100% of the time.
They took care of everything. I couldn't have expected more.
They're not about money, they're about people. The people come first.
They treat every client with respect, and they treat you like you're a friend of theirs.
I felt like they were really going to take care of me, and they did.
Devon James wins. 888-8888.
The story of Grace Med has always been told through its people, both those who serve and those who it is our honor to serve. We meet at the intersection of compassion and vulnerability, bringing health where there was illness and hope where there was despair. Our patients come to us bearing the weight of living in the margins, and we share the love of Jesus Christ with them by providing compassionate quality health care for all their physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. Because health restored is always hope renewed. Find hope today by scheduling an appointment with Grace Med.
I'm looking for some grass seed, but I can never figure out which type to buy.
You can pick your grass seed out of a field instead of off a shelf.
You can do that?
Let me take you to our plots.
At Premier Farm and Home, each problem we help you solve, you'll gain confidence and find that no one can take care of your lawn like you can.
Properties that are for sale by owner are typically on the market longer, sell for significantly less, and leave a seller open to potential legal problems than those properties sold with the assistance of a realtor. A home may be the largest and most complicated transaction you'll ever make. Trust a realtor with the ethics, expertise, and education to act in your best interest and guide you through the process. Find homes for sale in Northeast Kansas and a Sunflower Association Realtor member that's right for you at sunflowerrealtors.com.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Mackenzie Davis. So today we are talking about you. I'm reciting your thoughts described in the Sunflower Sound Off survey, that is. And Bob Beatty and Michael Smith are here to discuss it with me as well. So the question was about telling legislators what you think about what's happening in the world of Kansas politics. So when it comes to legislation for the average person, it can take a while to read. Myself. Of course, if you didn't know, most legislation has a supplemental note that breaks down everything in about 1 or 2 pages, but how easy is it to understand this bill itself? So here's what you had to say. They deliberately write legislation to confuse. Take the abortion amendment. Even the legislature had a hard time understanding it. One said fairly easy, just look up the bill and read it. And another said not difficult, but some legislation can be quite long and tedious. I feel like, you know, asking you guys this, it's know if it seems a little fair. You guys know it, but what does that make you, how does that make you feel when you hear people are having kind of a hard time?
Well, let me say a couple things on that.
Yeah.
The first is, we need to talk about lobbyists writing legislation and constitutional amendments. Now, on legislation, technically the final language is written by the Office of the Reviser. But lobbyists have a huge influence, not just on passing legislation or amendments, they actually have a lot to do with writing it. That constitutional amendment, the abortion rights thing, that was written by 2 interest groups. And so maybe one of the first things we could do for your viewers is say, hey, legislators, work with the Office of the Reviser, work with the Kansas Legislative Research Department, write your own bills. We don't need bills written by lobbyists.
So really, we need to be starting with the lobbyists instead of saying legislatures are the ones doing this.
That's right. Legislators are letting them get away with it. Same thing with the sports betting bill. When that first took effect, the state lost millions and millions of dollars in revenue because of carry forward provisions letting the companies write off their expenses. That's because the lobbyists put it in there.
One of the things that was mentioned multiple times in the survey was the gut and go process. So do you think that has been happening frequently in the legislature or this session specifically?
Usually happens at the last minute.
Do you want to explain that briefly, quickly, if you don't mind?
I do. I do. Kansas, most states don't actually allow this, neither does the U.S. Congress. You can take a piece of legislation that made it through the committees, made it through the process, and gut it. In other words, remove its entire content and put something completely different in there and then pass it without starting over. It's a real end run. It's kind of weird. Same thing with anonymously sponsored bills. A lot of states don't allow this. Kansas does. Technically, they're sponsored by a committee, but Kansas has some kind of funny business going on with the legislative process, and I would love to see them use more of the best practices that we see in some states.
Wow. How about
I
you,
mean,
Bob?
it's what I was saying, in some ways similar to bundling, in that here's a bill that's supposed to be about one thing, and then it's now about another.
Kind of a bait and switch.
And
kind
sometimes
of a
the
thing.
name might not even have anything to do with what's in it. So
that's right.
Yeah, let's be open about it. It can be very confusing to citizens.
Yeah. I gotta say, I'm learning a lot right now. Thank you. Now, one of the hot topics this session is, of course, abortion rights. As we all know, Kansans voted in August to maintain an abortion as a constitutional right, but we have seen multiple bills working to restrict abortion in some form. So what do you think that's happening especially after August? What is going on?
The folks that want to criminalize abortion are not going to give up because of that vote. Right. They're playing a long game. The recent one about if someone's born alive, the state has to protect that.
The born alive
that's
bill.
not a thing because the kind of abortion procedures it references are already illegal in Kansas. This is about creating an image. It's like the so-called partial birth abortion ban. That was an extremely rare procedure anyway. Has very little to do with the way most abortions are actually performed very early in the term. It's about trying to change the narrative. And so we have to ask ourselves, and your viewers should ask themselves, is changing the narrative really an appropriate thing to do with legislation when that legislation will have very little, if any, practical real-world impact?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. I think many anti-abortion folks saw Roe v. Wade, the overturning of that, as the end of abortion. And Roe v. Wade was overturned, and they thought, well, all the red states, the Republican states, for sure, abortion is going to be illegal. And that was the assumption in Kansas. I mean, I have to talk for myself. I didn't think the abortion amendment would fail. I didn't meet anybody else who did. And not only did it not pass, it was a 20-point margin. That was just shocking. And I still think there's a bit of shock going on.
Right.
The other thing is that elections have consequences. So the election of Laura Kelly was important in the sense that if these basically anti-abortion bills pass, I think we're almost sure she's going to veto every single one of them. So that's one of the consequences of having her being elected in November.
Okay. So let's take another quick break. We will be right back with more of your responses to our survey.
If you've been waiting to find out if siding is affordable for you, don't wait any longer. It's our Seams on the Back of the House sale. Click or call now.
Mental health is about emotional health and brain health.
Healthy children and families, and a healthy Kansas.
Go to acmhck.org to find your local community mental health center.
I'm Steve Matukowicz.
And I'm Diana Cox. Together with Washburn University,
we'd like to congratulate this month's Everything Woman honoree.
Congratulations, Christy White. Everything Woman, sponsored by Sharp Honda, Topeka ERN Hospital, and Washburn University.
Play the 27 KSNT Basketball Challenge. Sign up for your chance to win a 65-inch 4K Smart TV and pizza for an entire year. Join now at ksnt.com. Sponsored by Kansas 811 and these fine sponsors.
Older Americans are often targets of Medicare scams. That's why your local Senior Medicare Patrol exists. SMPs are designed to empower and assist you to prevent, detect, and report healthcare fraud, errors, and abuse. SMP offices are located in all 50 states, as well as the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. If you suspect Medicare fraud, errors, or abuse, your local SMP office is here to assist.
Jeff Goldblum is here. All the ladies, they call you a zaddy. What do you think about being a zaddy? Plus, from Outer Banks, Chase Stokes. Next, all new Kelly.
Monday at 1 on 27 KSNT.
Suicide. Talk about it. Save a life.
This week's Pets in Need Spotlight is Rambo. Rambo is a pit bull mix. He is about a year old and can be shy, but has a playful side as well. Rambo is sponsored, so his adoption fee is $0. You can meet Rambo at Helping Hands Humane Society.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Mackenzie Davis, filling in for Denisha. I'm here with Michael Smith and Bob Beatty. So we are skipping around on just a few topics that we discussed on our survey that we conducted recently. We're going to go to medical marijuana next because that's a big one. It was tabled. We don't know where this bill is going this session, which is leaving some Kansans to wonder what is next. So we asked you, do you think medical marijuana should be legalized? Some said yes, the state is missing out on revenue that other states are taking advantage of. Some said no, it's a slippery slope, and if a doctor thinks that the proper treatment, why should a politician be able to overrule that? One says it's much safer than opioids. How do you feel about that? Again, this is from our viewers who are reacting to this.
Well, it's a pretty good summary of the different arguments about it. The revenue is huge. Missouri, again, has recently moved to legal recreational marijuana, and it is experiencing very, very rapid growth, in part because the state taxes on that are lower than some other states where it's legal. And then the other side, some law enforcement folks have testified and so forth that, well, we could have illegal dealing kind of hiding behind the legal. And there have been some problems with that in Colorado and Oregon and so forth. And so from what I've seen, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, most Kansans do support medical marijuana, and I thought that last point, comparing it to opioids, was really valid, because there's the issue of anything you take medically can have side effects, but weighing the different side effects, how harmful is medical marijuana compared to a lot of prescription drugs which are legal?
Right.
You know, this is just really interesting watching. Over the last few years, Michael and I have done a number of programs about medical marijuana legalization, and the topic has come up so much for so many years that finally in this last year I said, I'll believe it when I see it. And the reason for that is it reminds me of the gambling debate a few years ago in Kansas. A number of states had legalized gambling, and it was bringing money into the state. And this is a few years ago. And then Kansas legalized gambling, and then there was gambling, and the world kept turning, and Kansas was getting money. And as we all know, sports betting was passed, and now, you know, the governor is putting bets, and people are betting, and we see it on TV. There's just a resistance to sort of the traditional way being upended, and we have to admit this is upending a traditional thought, which is you don't legalize drugs, reefer madness. And so what? And there's a sense of we're going to hold firm, you know, and put our hands over our ears. Well, Oklahoma and Missouri and Colorado and pretty much the rest of the entire country are going to do this. We're going to hold firm, Kansas. And it goes, you know, it's almost a rural thing, and we saw that. No, it's, you know, one viewer said it's a slippery slope. To what? It's a slippery slope to marijuana being legal. Yes. And change is hard.
And you also forgot to mention the initiative. Kansas does not have the ballot initiative statewide. Missouri does, Colorado does, Oklahoma does. A lot of these things like medical and now recreational marijuana, also Medicaid expansion, they didn't pass in those states because of the state legislature.
Right.
They passed because they were put on the ballot and voted upon. Kansas does not have the procedure to do that.
Now, when it comes to revenue, that's something that a lot of people are always saying, we're missing out on money. Where are the numbers that support you can make a big boost from the revenue if you legalize marijuana medically and recreationally?
Well, certainly from Missouri right now, because it's recent. It was just February that it went into effect, and the revenues are exceeding projections every single month. So it does appear that there's a huge market for that, and that the tax does not deter people who are interested. Interesting thing about Missouri, medical marijuana is exempt from a lot of the state taxes. Recreational marijuana is taxed. So to collect the tax revenue, that's a push toward recreational marijuana. Now, if you want to call that a slippery slope, so be it, but that's how that works. The talk is now of the local add-on sales taxes. Can they go ahead and apply that to recreational marijuana sales? It looks like the answer is yes, and that's going to mean some revenue for local government.
And these local counties are rushing to get votes to pass these local taxes. They want the
money.
Action.
They want the money. Yeah. Right
on. Okay, so we know how our viewers feel. I don't know. It's all over the place. It's up in the air.
I mean, as political scientists and people who watch polls, it's a settled question among the people of Kansas. There's no longer a debate.
Right.
Do the people want it? Yes. It's really, the debate is, and the question is, what about Republican leadership? They don't want it. And so the question is going to continue to be, what will it take for them it's basically to accept it?
Right. Okay, so let's take another quick break. We're going to get to a few more responses to our survey that we took. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Bob Goodall. We're expanding and we need to turn our warehouse into a showroom. Nothing held back. When it's gone, it's gone. No credit financing and tax refund discounts at the original Kansas Furniture Mart.
It would appear that the butler did it. But this isn't a whodunit film. It's a Nissan sales event. Now that's a killer deal. Good thing this Rogue has a VC turbo engine, unlike RAV4.
Get 0% financing for 36 months on select models.
Catch these offers while you can.
Our innovative age-in-place assisted living concept at Aldersgate Village, called Home Plus, has been so popular, we're expanding again. Our new Home Plus is a private assisted living residence with all the staff and services to provide increasing nursing care as you need it, so you'll never have to move again. Only 12 assisted living suites available, and we're taking reservations now. Call 785-286-7490 or visit aldersgatevillage.org.
A woman is claiming she is the missing British toddler, Madeleine McCann.
Is it possible that Madeleine McCann has finally been found?
I want to know the truth.
New Dr. Phil.
Monday at 3 on 27 KSNT. This week's Morning Coffee Club prize is a rain gauge, sponsored by Kansas 811. Sign up at ksnt.com for your chance to win. Then watch 27 News weekday mornings from 5 to 7 to see if you've won.
Hi, I'm Bob Goodall from Kansas Furniture Mart. It's a wall-to-wall, ceiling-to-floor, nothing held back, warehouse remodeling liquidation. No credit check financing and tax refund discounts at the original Kansas Furniture Mart.
Sign up for your chance to win weekly prizes at ksnt.com.
All right, welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Mackenzie Davis. Continuing our conversation, Governor Kelly has said she wants to see Medicaid expansion in the state, and we asked you what your thoughts were. One said, if it can be done in a fiscally responsible way, no. Wasted tax dollars, and Kansas is leaving federal funds on the table. I think New York State is experiencing problems due to their expansion of Medicaid. We need to be wise and look before leaping. It's probably not something our state could actually afford indefinitely. So how do you think? I know you wanted to talk about Medicaid expansion.
I did.
How do these responses sit with you?
They feel about right. Maybe a little, the anti-expansion side, a little overrepresented. Recent polls have a 60% plus of Kansans supporting Medicaid expansion. 2 very red bordering states, actually 3, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Missouri, have all done Medicaid expansion. As far as the point about states experiencing problems, one of the neat things about being a late adapter, you can study the other states, look at the ones that did a good job and the ones that did not so well, use those as your guinea pigs. But this is a huge issue for rural hospitals. We've had several close, and some more will close no matter what. But to minimize that, Medicaid expansion really would make a difference, and that rural support might be why we're seeing the high support for it in the polls.
Right. How do you feel about that, Bob?
Well, Michael makes a great point about so many states. It's similar to medical marijuana. So many states have actually adapted to this, and some have gone very well, some have not gone so well.
That's
so
right.
Kansas, if the Kansas legislature wanted to do it, they could, yes, of course, do a very extensive study, what worked, what didn't work, come up with a Kansas plan, not New York, not some other state, that I think would have a good chance of working. But the other point is, we're over $1 billion that Kansas has refused in terms of Medicaid expansion money.
And just briefly, Oklahoma has been very successful at implementing it since it passed there. Missouri has struggled and is finally catching up. So there's a local example right there of comparing and contrasting 2 states.
Right. Well, thank you all so much. I got to say, I learned a lot. Bob knows. Politics and myself, we are getting to know each other a little bit more, but hopefully our viewers got a little bit of a better understanding, and we definitely got an understanding from their own responses as well. So thank you both for being here.
Well, thank you, Mackenzie.
Appreciate it. All right, and that was your look inside Kansas politics. So if you want to keep up to date on all things Kansas politics, then follow us on social media. We are on Twitter at NKS Politics. We'll also post the full video on YouTube. Just search KSNT News and check KSNT.com/inside-Kansas-politics for past episodes.